Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions on finance, employment and sustainable growth. And as ever, if questions are short and succinct and we have answers to match, we may get through everyone. Question number 1, Sandra White.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what its position is on concerns regarding Glasgow City Council's plans for redevelopment of George Square.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government has agreed the business case for the overall tax incremental financing scheme for the Buchanan Quarter, which includes improvements to George Square, but the precise detail of these improvements is a matter for Glasgow City Council.
Sandra White.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response, and can I only say and echo what the people of Glasgow are saying, that this whole sad episode has been an absolute shambles from start to finish. Cabinet Secretary may be aware that £90,000 has already been spent, and that cost is rising and people are most concerned. Can I therefore ask the Cabinet Secretary if he is meeting, or if the Scottish Government is meeting with Glasgow City Council and Councillor Gordon Matheson, whose idea this was, could he please keep this Parliament informed and the people of Glasgow informed of any updates, as this hasn't happened? Really, don't keep the people of Glasgow in the dark.
Cabinet Secretary.
In response to the point that Sandra White has raised, the TIF project comprises a range of public infrastructure in Glasgow's Buchanan Quarter, including improvements to George Square, but also the pedestrianisation of Dundas Lane, city centre connectivity, the reconfiguration of Queen Street Station's entrance and an enhanced Royal Concert Hall. The proposals that are now being considered by Glasgow City Council are for what has been described as a substantial facelift of George Square. The Scottish Government looks forward to discussing this change in direction of the project with Glasgow City Council to understand the implications for the total cost of the project, and of course if there are any relevant issues in relation to the tax incremental financing element of that proposal, Parliament will of course be kept up to date on those issues.
Supplementary, Patrick Harvey.
While the Cabinet Secretary knows that I have some problems with the notion of tax incremental finance in this case, would it not have made sense if the Council wanted to proceed with a kind of Disneyland George Square on the scale of the proposals that came forward in the last few weeks? Would it not have made sense for them to bring that forward when the TIF scheme was initially mooted, so that there could be public, media and indeed parliamentary scrutiny of those proposals, rather than this last-minute rush that we've seen in the last few weeks, leading to a bit of a fiasco outcome?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think it's important that we separate two elements here, and I was anxious to do that in my answer to Sandra White, and that is the TIF scheme, which is essentially the construction of a vehicle to enable public sector resources to be used to leverage private sector investment, which I think is a good way to proceed in terms of maximising the investment impact on the City of Glasgow. And some of the detailed components of the proposals, because I think it's just good practice on any detailed components of this type, such as the redevelopment of George Square or any other aspect, the Queen Street Station entrance or whatever, for there to be adequate and full and proper and meaningful public consultation about the contents of those proposals. And I think that would be an essential element to be taken forward for all of those projects. But I think it is important that we distinguish between the TIF scheme and the specific proposals on the ground, which are unreservedly a matter for Glasgow City Council.
Drew Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm unclear as to whether members of this Parliament who have actually campaigned for an improvement of George Square are now supportive of or not. And I recall the group leader of the SNP in Glasgow arguing that George Square actually did a substantial facelift and not just a revamp. I presume he now takes the opposite view. Is the Minister today saying that the changes which have now been proposed are unlikely to have any impact in terms of the TIF agreement that the Deputy First Minister has already agreed with Glasgow? And would he agree with me that the priority of all parties should be to move on with improvements to George Square for Glaswegians and to make it a fitting place to welcome our visitors in 2014?
Cabinet Secretary.
Impressive though the surroundings are of Glasgow City Chambers, I just would point out that I am not a member of Glasgow City Council, and I have no aspirations to be a member of Glasgow City Council, just for the record. So, to a lot of what Mr Smith's comments, I think perhaps should have been bandied around in the precincts of Glasgow City Chambers in much more elegant surroundings than I think we debate in this parliamentary chamber. I simply make the point that we look forward, and I said this in my original answer to Sandra White, to discussions with the City Council to understand what will be the implications of the change of direction on the redevelopment of George Square on the overall TIF scheme. As I've stressed during my answers today, the TIF scheme and the specific proposals on the ground are two very different elements of debate. We look forward to working with the City Council to maximise the effectiveness of the TIF scheme, to leverage in investment into the City area, and obviously it's up to the City Council to take forward the different projects and to consult effectively with members of the public about those issues.
Thank you. Question number 2, Graeme Dey.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to protect and increase employment in rural areas.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
President Officer, we are investing significant sums of money in rural areas, including some £455 million of direct support annually to farmers and crofters across Scotland, and £214 million of the Scottish Rural Development Programme funding for farming businesses and communities in rural areas. These sums go a long way towards safeguarding in the order of 68,000 jobs employed in agriculture and rural businesses across Scotland. Across the sea fisheries and aquaculture sectors, the Government is also awarding funding using the European Fisheries Fund of over £66 million to 677 projects, generating about £150 million worth of investment.
Graeme Dey.
An SRDP grant of just £56,000 will allow the Building Workshop, a rurally based architectural company run by a young husband and wife team in my constituency, to open their first bespoke office later this year and double their existing workforce. Will the Scottish Government continue to think smart on how it protects and enhances employment opportunities in rural areas, and consider the suggestion made by the Rural Affairs Committee in its draft budget report to allow youngsters seeking modern apprenticeships and rural skills to work for a range of businesses throughout the term of the apprenticeship in order that they might be better placed to obtain year-round employment?
Cabinet Secretary.
The first point to say is that I think I'm probably familiar with the business that, to which Mr Dey refers, given that it is based in the area that I used to represent before the boundary changes in 2011, and I'm glad to hear of the progress that the company is making. I think the suggestion from the Rural Affairs Committee is one very much worthy of further consideration, and I will ensure that the Minister for Youth Employment, who's heard the points that have been raised by Mr Dey, examines that point in particular detail. It's essential that we find innovative ways of strengthening the skill base and the employment opportunity base in rural Scotland, and if we need to deploy a certain amount of flexibility to enable that to be the case, then I think we should be open very much to that possibility.
Thank you. Question number 3, Stewart Maxwell.
To ask the Scottish Government what preparations it has made for the Bannockburn celebrations during Homecoming 2014.
Minister Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, a range of partners are working together on a programme to mark the 700th anniversary of the Battle of Bannockburn. The Battle of Bannockburn reenactment weekend over the 28th to the 30th of June will be a centrepiece of the Homecoming Scotland 2014 celebrations and a highlight of Stirling 2014 programme. It will include the largest battle reenactment ever hosted at the Memorial Battlefield, a tented clan village, weaponry and falconry displays, and a clan parade.
Stewart Maxwell.
Can I thank the Minister for that answer? And can I also pay tribute to the work of Strathalevin artisans in promoting the story of Robert the Bruce and his connections to Dumbarton? The Minister will, I'm sure, will agree that the story of Robert the Bruce has tremendous potential to generate tourism opportunities across a variety of areas of Scotland. Therefore, can I ask the Minister what the Government's plans are to promote other sites of interest associated with Robert the Bruce, particularly the area of Dumbarton?
Minister.
Well, Stewart Maxwell is entirely correct, Presiding Officer. For many of us, especially on these benches, Robert the Bruce is a national hero. And I hope that that applies to members of all the benches across this Parliament, because although Robert the Bruce won Scotland's independence before the invention of political parties, I suspect that he was politically ecumenical because he simply believed in his country of Scotland. So we are very keen to do everything we can to commemorate his memory, his achievements for Scotland, and I'm very keen to work with the member and all members of all parties to secure that objective.
Rhoda Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs have said that the Bannockburn reenactment will not be enough to bring the diaspora back to Scotland. In light of this, what's his plan C for Homecoming 2014?
Minister.
I had the pleasure of meeting I don't know what the collective noun is, but a number of clan chiefs at Castle Loud just before the turn of the year, and I look forward to a further engagement with several more of them in early course. And I can say that we work very closely with the clan chiefs. We recognise that clan gatherings take place, generally speaking, every 5 years on a quinquennial basis, that they have a great deal to offer to Scotland, and I think we shouldn't be unduly pessimistic about the success of the event this year, and I'm heartened by the lesson of Homecoming 2009, where the number of visitors who came to Scotland as a result of this initiative vastly exceeded our target. The revenue vastly exceeded our target, and therefore, in that sense, it was a great success.
Thank you. Question number 4, Paul Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action has been taken to tackle unemployment in the Glasgow Provan constituency.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is investing heavily to support the job prospects of people in Glasgow. For example, for the period June 2011 to June 2013, we've awarded £7.58 million of European Social Fund and £616,000 of European Regional Development Fund to Glasgow's Community Planning Partnership. This money will be used to help around 10,500 people move towards work and create 1,300 jobs. Last year, we also awarded Glasgow an extra £3.37 million to tackle the challenge of youth employment. Meanwhile, we are working hard to promote the city's economic growth. Since 2010, businesses in Glasgow North and Glasgow East have accepted offers of regional selective assistance totalling £2.4 million. These offers are in respect of projects expected to create or safeguard 240 jobs.
Paul Martin.
Presiding Officer, the Minister will be aware of a number of schemes that exist throughout Scotland that are designed to regenerate derelict land and at the same time create employment. I wonder if the Minister would agree to meet with me to discuss how we could take forward such a scheme in the Easter House area of my constituency.
Cabinet Secretary.
I'd be delighted to meet with Mr Martin on that question. I think the focus of the Government is about working collaboratively with a range of different players to try to bring together as much creative thinking to find new ways of enabling sites to be brought into use, to leverage investment and to remove any obstacles there may well be to that investment taking place. So I will happily arrange to see Mr Martin and any of his colleagues that he may wish to bring to discuss those issues.
Thank you. Question number 5, Sarah Boyack.
To ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to tackle unemployment in Lothian.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
The Scottish Government is taking forward a range of initiatives to support employment in the Lothian region. Over the course of the current European funding programme, a total of over £12 million has been received by the City of Edinburgh, Mid Lothian and West Lothian councils in terms of the support to improve the skills of the unemployed, the lowest paid and the socially deprived. Since April 2010, regional selective assistance offers totalling £2.8 million have been accepted by businesses in the Lothians. These offers are in respect of projects expected to create or safeguard 313 jobs. The Lothians are also benefiting from our ongoing commitment to deliver 25,000 modern apprenticeship starts for each year of this Parliament. In total, we have put in place support for 46,500 training opportunities this year.
Sarah Boyack.
Can I thank the Minister for his response? Already this year in the retail sector we've seen high-profile casualties with Jessop's, HMV and Blockbuster entering administration. Between these three chains there are 15 stores in Edinburgh alone, of which 7 have been confirmed for closure. Can the Minister give an update on what action the Scottish Government is taking to support workers at those who are at risk of losing their jobs? And can he provide further information on news that the restructuring specialist Hilco has bought HMV's debt and what impact this might have on the future of this retailer?
Cabinet Secretary.
Of course, in any circumstance where individuals are either in danger of or have lost employment, they will have access to the PACE support scheme, which is working in all parts of the country, and that will be available to the individuals who are affected by any of these redundancy programmes or closures. Secondly, there is obviously a range of support which is offered both by the Scottish Government, by our partners at local level, in the short term in terms of getting people back into employment, and then of course there are the DWP programmes which kick in if individuals have been unemployed for longer than a 9-month period. Also, in addition to that, finally, the Government will be prepared to discuss through the work that's been undertaken by Malcolm Fraser in the review of town centres as to how we adapt to what are clearly quite significantly changing shopping patterns by members of the public, where members of the public are, to a greater extent, using online shopping opportunities and a combination of traditional shopping opportunities. And we need to consider with Malcolm Fraser how our town centres and our retail environment respond to some of that changing consumer behaviour to ensure that we have vibrant town centres, which is an aspiration we all share.
Question number 6, Michael McMahon.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what reductions it expects in unemployment levels during 2013.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, this morning it was reported that unemployment in Scotland has fallen by 14,000 over the 3-month period, September to November 2012. Youth unemployment, also as part of these numbers, saw the largest drop since the data series began in 2006 and is at the lowest level since March to May 2011. Unemployment remains too high, but this is the second month in succession in which we have seen significant progress, with Scotland recording lower youth unemployment, higher youth employment and lower youth inactivity than the rest of the United Kingdom. Our aim for 2013 is to use every power at our disposal to continue this trend and to make real progress in reducing total and specifically youth unemployment.
Michael McMahon.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer, and the reduction in the latest unemployment figures is very welcome, but does the Cabinet Secretary agree with the Scottish Chambers of Commerce, who have pointed out that there are underlying issues that must be addressed by actions to stimulate the economy? Is the Cabinet Secretary concerned, for example, that companies such as Amazon, who employed large numbers of seasonal staff in the run-up to Christmas, have been reported as retaining relatively few people on a permanent basis? And given that the Scottish Government provided financial assistance to Amazon, is there anything that could be done in such circumstances to seek agreement from companies in receipt of such government funding to commit to retaining staff and to recruit employees, particularly from the far too large pool of 90,000 under-25s who appear to have been dumped on the dole with little prospect of employment at this time?
Cabinet Secretary.
I agree very much with the points that Mr McMahon articulates from the Scottish Chambers of Commerce. There are, of course, underlying issues that need to be confronted, and I think I've made no secret of the fact consistently that I believe there is a strong role for government in leading a dynamic programme of capital investment and a programme of investment in skills and training to support economic recovery, and we will continue to articulate that point. The Government is interested in maximising employment within Scotland. We talk regularly to employers about the opportunities to do so. Any employer that is in receipt of any form of regional selective assistance is required to conform entirely with the requirements and the constraints of that RSA offer that is made, and the Government monitors that on a regular basis, as I have reported to Parliament. So we certainly will work with employers to maximise the employment opportunities that exist for people within Scotland.
Thank you. Briefly, Ken McIntosh.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. One of the welcome announcements in September's budget statement was the announcement of a wage subsidy programme. Is the Cabinet Secretary able to give us any details, any further details on how that wage subsidy programme will work to counteract unemployment, and if not, when those details will be forthcoming?
Cabinet Secretary.
The Government is finalising the details that will be available on the Employer Recruitment Initiative. As I indicated, this will be focused on the SME sector to provide practical assistance to enable small, medium-sized employers to take on additional staff. That has been very much the aspiration of organisations representing small businesses, whether it's the Federation of Small Business or the Scottish Chambers of Commerce, as we have just discussed. The details will be announced very shortly of that programme, and I look forward to seeing the positive impact this will have on the labour market in Scotland.
Question number 7, Dennis Robertson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I begin by offering you and the Chamber an apology, as I will have to leave after my question, Presiding Officer? To ask the Scottish Government, how important is oil and gas to the economy of Scotland, and how important would it be to an independent Scotland?
Minister Ferguson.
The oil and gas sector is one of Scotland's great success stories. In addition to supporting almost 200,000 jobs across Scotland, the industry generated over £10,000 million tax revenue last year. There are up to 24,000 million barrels of oil and gas remaining in the North Sea, with a potential wholesale value of £1.5 trillion. It is therefore clear, Presiding Officer, that the industry will remain a key part of the Scottish economy for decades to come.
Dennis Robertson.
I thank the Minister for his response. In the same vein, Minister, how important is our renewable sector to the economy of Scotland, and how important would it be to an independent Scotland?
Minister.
Well, the renewables sector is extremely important to the Scottish economy. It supports, Presiding Officer, around 11,000 jobs in this country. It has seen over the past year, I believe, around £1,000 million of investment, and over the coming years, the projected investment in our renewable sector is of the order of around £9,000 million. Now, these are gigantic numbers.
Could you be Minister?
What they reflect is that this will be extremely important to the Scottish economy for many years to come.
Thank you. Question number 8, Mary Scanlon.
Scottish Executive, what financial assistance it will provide to Moray Council for the storm damage to Lossiemouth and Kingston?
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Also, following the severe weather in December, I agreed to activate the Bellwyn scheme, which provides additional revenue support to affected councils to assist with the immediate and unforeseen costs of dealing with the aftermath of emergency incidents. We will consider all eligible expenditure under the terms of the Bellwyn scheme when formal claims have been received from the affected councils, including Moray Council. In addition, Marine Scotland has been in discussions with the private operators of Lossiemouth Harbour in respect of the storm damage to the harbour walls and quayside and the wider removal of debris from the harbour. Confirmation to proceed with works costing £23,000 has been given under the Emergency Harbours Grant Scheme for Fisheries Harbours.
Mary Scanlon.
I thank the Minister very much for that response. You will know that during the storms last month there was significant damage caused to the seawall at Lossiemouth, and of course remedial repairs have been done. And at Kingston, homes which had been protected by the shingle bank saw this buffer from the sea reduced by hundreds of tonnes of shingle. But my understanding of the Bellwyn scheme is that it provides very limited financial support for councils, only for the immediate aftermath of an emergency, but not for the repairs that are now required at Lossiemouth and the significant investment at Kingston. So given that the Bellwyn scheme in its current form would not appear to assist Moray Council, and their GAE grant for coastal protection is less than £50,000. What changes to Bellwyn or additional financial support will the Government offer to assist Moray Council in reinstating protection for Lossiemouth and Kingston?
Cabinet Secretary.
Mary Scanlon is correct in her description of the Belwyn scheme. It is a discretionary scheme that addresses revenue costs only, essentially to repair damage to bring up to a previous standard. Now, if there is additional work that's required for any element of betterment, that essentially is capital expenditure which is not eligible under the Belwyn scheme, and that has been the case for some time. There is, of course, an element of insurable activity here in certain aspects of the harbour infrastructure that would have to be tested. But we have made clear to the relevant authorities that the Government will engage in constructive discussion about how we resolve any outstanding issues if the Belwyn formula or the insurable activity does not adequately deal with the issues at stake. I would point out to Mary Scanlon, of course, that in Murray there is very significant allocations of government grant to support flood prevention schemes, albeit inland schemes, particularly around Elgin and Forres, and previously in Rothes. But we are very much willing to discuss these issues with the local authority.
Thank you. Can I remind members of the need for brief and relevant questions and answers? Question number 9, George Adam.
To ask the Scottish Government what impact the Department of Work and Pensions work programme is having on unemployment in Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
So, the latest statistics released by the Department of Work and Pensions show that less than 1 in 10 people who started the work programme in June 2011 gained sustained employment within a year. As I've indicated in other answers already, the labour market statistics released today show that unemployment in Scotland has fallen by 14,000 over the quarter, and the youth unemployment rate has had the largest annual drop since 2006 and is now at its lowest since March to May 2011.
George Adam.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. Like many other MSPs, I've had constituents come into my office raising deep concerns regarding the work programme. Has the Cabinet Secretary had discussions with the DWP regarding this programme and the outcomes it may or may not be delivering for Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
We have had regular discussion with the DWP about the work programme. I think it's important that we see this as part of the range of different steps that are available to encourage people back into employment. One of the mechanisms that we have to ensure that all of these initiatives are compatible is the Scottish Employment Forum, which will be meeting on the 31st of January. It's a joint forum chaired by myself, the Secretary of State for Scotland, and the COSLA spokesperson on this issue, Councillor Harry McGuigan, and it is designed to ensure that all of our interventions, whether they are by the DWP or the Scottish Government or local authorities, are focused and supportive of individuals to get into employment, which is the essential requirement of all of these schemes.
Question number 10, Duncan McNeill.
To ask the Scottish Government when the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Employment and Sustainable Growth last met the Chief Executive of Scottish Enterprise and what issues were discussed.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
I last met the Chief Executive and other members of the Board of Scottish Enterprise on the 16th of January to discuss a range of issues important to the delivery of the Scottish Government's economic strategy.
Duncan McNeill.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response, and should I take this opportunity to say that I recognise the Cabinet Secretary in his visit to Inverclyde recognised the significant potential of cruise line business at Inverclyde and indeed Scotland, and indeed also the Minister in his encouraging words in respect to cruise liners and the need to extend and maximise the potential there at Inverclyde. Did the Cabinet Secretary, given the Cabinet Secretary and the Minister's support there, did they take time to speak to the Chief Executive of Scottish Enterprise and impress on them how important this project is, and can he give us an update today?
Cabinet Secretary.
I would stress to Mr McNeill that the specific topic of cruise business did not come up in my conversation last week, but as Mr McNeill will recall, I was accompanied on my visit to Inverclyde by representatives of Scottish Enterprise. The Government and the organisation are working closely together on the encouragement and development of cruise liner activity to ensure that this is maximised all across Scotland, and I acknowledge the significance of the opportunities at Inverclyde. I'm quite sure some of what we've heard about the obstacles being put in the way of this activity by the UK Border Agency are as much a concern to Mr McNeill as they are to me, and I look forward to pursuing some of these issues to maximise the opportunity we have to attract many cruise liners to Scotland so their visitors can appreciate the strength of Scotland, particularly in this year of Natural Scotland.
Question number 11, Bruce Crawford.
To ask the Scottish Government what capital allocation has been made to Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park Authority as part of the 2013-14 shovel-ready construction and maintenance projects.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
£290,000 of shovel-ready capital investment has been allocated to the Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park Authority in 2013-14. This will help fund a range of projects aimed at facilitating improvements to visitor infrastructure, buildings and the development of community projects. These funds are in addition to the £1 million allocated in the next financial year following the spending review. The Government also allocated £1.1 million of shovel-ready capital investment in 12-13 that was announced in June, and £0.29 million of capital investment in 12-13 that was announced in December. Capital investment is part of the Scottish Government's continuing effort to support growth in the Scottish economy.
Bruce Crawford.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. Would the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that if the Labour Party's budget proposals put forward yesterday were accepted by Parliament, then all of this 13-14 money would be lost to the park, and in this year of Natural Scotland, that would be an utter disgrace and very unhelpful to the park economy?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think the point that Mr Crawford makes is very relevant to the budget debate we held yesterday, because the argument that has been advanced by the Labour Party was to take the capital consequentials that I had allocated in December to projects such as the one in Mr Crawford's constituency and apply that to another project. So, the key point here is that the money can't be spent twice. It can only be spent the once when it's capital. It can't be double promised and multiple promised by people. It can only be spent the once, and the Government has set out its choices. And of course, if other people want to change those choices, then of course they have to argue for those points and take the consequences.
Question number 12, John Wilson. Point of order, Ken McIntosh.
If I may, President Officer, can I just confirm that this is questions to the Finance Minister, not questions to the Shadow Finance Minister? Because I'm not entirely sure how Mr Swinney can answer incorrectly.
Mr McIntosh, it's not a point of order. I'm moving to question number 12, John Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what employment initiatives it provides to tackle unemployment amongst people aged 24 and over.
Cabinet Secretary.
Since the start of 2007, more than half of those accessing ESF employability support across Scotland have been over the age of 25. These projects address the challenge to improve the skills of the unemployed, the lowest paid and the socially deprived, while contributing to Scotland's economic growth in the future. To date, there has been £63.684 million of ESF grant allocated in Priority 5. £32.34 million of this funding has been allocated to 16 community planning partnerships in some of the most deprived areas of Scotland. From April, we will introduce a new employability fund aimed at further supporting local areas to provide targeted interventions for those out of work. As with the current Training for Work programme, this will be open to people aged 18 and over.
John Wilson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his reply, and while I welcome the unemployment figures released today, according to the Office for National Statistics, in November 2012, claimant unemployment by age, for example, in South Lanarkshire, for those aged 25 and over, stood at 75% of claimant count. Could the Cabinet Secretary expand on the issues that will be raised in terms of the Employability Fund to get those over the age of 24 into sustainable employment?
Cabinet Secretary.
The focus of the Employability Fund will be exactly on the point that Mr Wilson raises, on ensuring that we support individuals back into the labour market. Anyone who is over 18 who has been unemployed for 13 weeks or more can currently access a wide range of opportunities through Training for Work. This will be incorporated into the Employability Fund, which seeks to help local areas respond even more flexibly to labour market demand in their localities.
Thank you. Question number 13, Jane Baxter.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what consideration it has given to the use of social impact bonds.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, this is the first occasion in which I've had the chance to welcome Jane Baxter to Parliament, and I do so and wish her well in her tenure in Parliament. The Scottish Government is working with a range of stakeholders to develop and consider how best to test innovative approaches to planning, delivering and funding public services. Social impact bonds are being considered as part of this work.
Jane Baxter.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. I'm pleased to hear that the Minister is aware of the potential benefits of social impact bonds, but disappointed that pilot projects have not yet been identified. Given the success of the YMCA's Living Balance project in Perth, which I was pleased to have visited earlier this month, and which is helping 300 young people over 3 years into employment or training, and which uses a social impact bond model, and is one of only 6 in the UK to do so, will the Minister commit to identifying their social impact bond pilot projects as soon as possible? Cabinet Secretary.
I'm familiar with the project that Jane Baxter refers to with the YMCA in Perth and understand its impact. What we have taken forward is a range of ventures which are operating in similar territory to this, principally around public social partnerships, and we've seen some very interesting work emerging through the work in the Reducing Reoffending Change Fund, which has been at the heart of the Government's preventative spend agenda in the criminal justice area. So we will continue to develop these models. We remain very open to the question of social impact bonds. I think there's still an element of observation that has to be undertaken to be assured that these represent a strong model for development, but I am encouraged by what I see from the public social partnerships which operate in the same territory as the material on social impact bonds.
Question number 14, Alex Ferguson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to encourage new business start-ups.
Minister Ferguson.
The Scottish Government recognises the vital role new businesses play in contributing to sustainable economic growth, so we are committed to maintaining a supportive environment to encourage new start-ups and help them grow. Key measures include support from the Business Gateway, helping over 11,000 businesses start up last year, the Small Business Bonus Scheme benefiting over 89,000 business properties, reducing unnecessary burdens on small businesses and making it easier for them to access public sector contracts.
Alex Ferguson.
Well, I'm grateful for that response from the Minister, but I have to question how effective the Government's policies are, because I note that in the third quarter of last year, business start-ups fell by some 16%, and that was the third quarter in a row in which there's been a fall in Scotland. I'm sure the Minister would agree that economic recovery depends to a large degree on new business start-ups. So can I simply ask what further steps the Scottish Government is considering to reverse the current trend?
Minister.
As Mr Ferguson knows, these are tough economic times. I think we would agree with that, but I know that there are a number of great successes in Dumfries and Galloway, and I have the pleasure of visiting that part of the world, south of Scotland, on many occasions and seen considerable success amongst businesses. I also know that in Dumfries and Galloway, over 4,000 businesses are benefiting from the Small Business Bonus Scheme. Now, these savings are up to £4,500 per property, and they benefit the smallest business in the land. And in Dumfries and Galloway, just like the Highland area, small businesses are actually far more important than they are to many of the city economies. So I think lots of good things are doing, but if the member wants to identify any particular suggestions, particular measures that he believes we should introduce, then I'm more than happy to meet with him and discuss. But I'm comforted by the fact that, for example, VAT registrations in Scotland increased by 19.5% between 2002 and 11, a higher percentage than in the UK as a whole. And if the member wishes, I am, as always, happy to meet with him to discuss how together we tackle these important issues, working constructively across party.
Question number 15, Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what progress it has made towards implementing shovel-ready projects announced in December 2012.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the construction and maintenance projects which we announced as part of a £205 million capital funding package in December are now being taken forward by the relevant portfolios.
Claire Adamson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. I can also congratulate the Cabinet Secretary for securing the additional Scottish construction projects worth £205 million, albeit in the context of an initial 33% cut in the capital budget. Can he advise me how Central Scotland region will benefit from the funding announcement, and advise also how Scotland might have proceeded differently with the full fiscal powers of independence?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, obviously, as Claire Adamson correctly says, the Government has maintained a very clear and strong emphasis on the importance of capital investment, and I'm glad that we were able to make some progress in persuading the United Kingdom Government to change tack from its vicious reduction in capital expenditure that was undertaken and imposed on Scotland. In relation to the Central Scotland region that was the subject of Claire Adamson's question, a number of projects will go forward. Maintenance projects for the Sheriff Courts in Airdrie, Falkirk and Hamilton, an increase in the supply of affordable and social rented homes. Health boards in Forth Valley and Lanarkshire will benefit from the ongoing maintenance programme, and particularly focus on improving the fabric of Monklands Hospital, which may have an interest to the presiding officer, trunk road resurfacing schemes on the A726 near East Kilbride, and a variety of other measures, including the allocation of resources to local government to assist in their capital infrastructure. I should also point out that cycling infrastructure with active travel access to stations on the Airdrie to Bathgate railway line will also be taken forward.
A very brief question 16 from Colin Beattie with brief answer, please.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the results of the Bank of Scotland's December 2012 survey of purchasing managers.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government welcomes the findings of December's Bank of Scotland Purchasing Managers Index, which shows a third consecutive monthly expansion in private sector activity in Scotland and the strongest monthly improvement since June.
Colin Beattie.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response. I was certainly pleased with the positive growth to start the new year. Would the Cabinet Secretary agree that despite the negativity of the No campaign's rhetoric on an independent Scottish economy, companies are still actively investing in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, there's a significant amount of evidence to support Mr Beattie's point, whether it's from Statoil or Dana Petroleum or Global Energy Group or Plexus or Vector Aerospace, and of course that's all before we realised that the United Kingdom economy was to be plunged into 5 years of uncertainty in the debate about the EU referendum, courtesy of the United Kingdom government. So all the scaremongering about the independence referendum will disappear now that the UK government has taken the course of action it has now taken.